I got an interesting question with a generous donation the other day that I thought would be a nice addition to my previous video about choosing the wrong women on purpose. Now, Greg wrote in, I am the youngest of four, but for separate circumstances, I was much more on the self-isolated track. I mean, my video was more about me being the only child pre-puberty, and then love being taken away and being thrust out into the world on my own. Being love bombed pre-puberty, and then that cord being suddenly severed and the affection withdrawn. I think the overriding issue here is the love and affection being taken away. Your mum monkey branching to somebody else in terms of affection. He continues, just curious, you mentioned something to the extent of pushing away better, more stable women. Do you think that this would have changed your life view on this topic had you accepted these women? In short, no. I've never been a fan of this theoretical looking back in time. It invites a lot of regret. It's fictional. Yeah, it's a creative exercise. It's fun, but I haven't found it useful because it's fairly neurotic. You get nowhere and it's not helpful. I don't like entertaining this seemingly harmless time travel fiction. What would you do if you could go back in time and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, obviously with the brain you have now, but I think it's avoiding the issue is, you're not doing anything now. You've got the brain and ethics and maturity and experience now, yet you'd rather go back into an ineffectual time where you can't actually do anything. Again, you're stuck in your head. You're better off acting on it now in the only way you can. I mean, don't get me wrong. I did this in the past too, and it didn't help at all. If only this girl I was with didn't have this one piece, we may have been together still. We may have been perfect. If I didn't leave my job, she would have stayed. If she didn't gain weight, I would have stayed. You see how it's all relative? It works both ways sometimes. However much I didn't know when I was younger, I had a fairly rational sense of I can give things a try, but not the things that there's no coming back from. You can go for a trip here, you can move to a new suburb, you can change your circumstances, but if it doesn't suit you, if you can go back, that's no big deal. That's finding out who you are, what works for you, etc. But if you go down a path that's irreversible, you have an operation, you have a sex change, you have children, you basically sever any possibility of going back. You're not trying something new. You've decided on something new that's irrecoverable. And you've got some theoretical people that will say, well, every choice moving forward is a choice. You can't go back in time. Yeah, you can't go back in time. But aside from time, I've always had a sense of, okay, I'll try a lot of things, but I had this really great fear of being lost, losing all the things I knew I liked. Simple things like, whatever your hobbies are. For me, they were important. I'm different in that way. My hobbies and passions to me aren't frivolous. They are the thing that get me up in the morning with enthusiasm and are looking forward to something, and those are the things I won't give up without a good reason. I won't give up, period. You can rationalize it fairly easily. Someone who cares for you won't ask you to choose between who you are, what your passions are, and them. Objectively, that's completely selfish. I wouldn't ask that of another person. Continuing, in my case, I'm divorced from what was perceivably a more stable woman. Good upbringing, pretty virgin before me, college educated, but we ended up in the same place as most marriages. As her list of demands from me increased and general laziness on her end also increased. Not saying I was perfect, far from it, but just a point of discussion. Isn't it interesting? I hear it much more often from guys that's saying, She had her problems, but so did I. There's a sense of a third person observing the situation fairly. You don't get that very often or at all from women. And in terms of her list of demands from me increased and general laziness on her end also increased. This is one thing I've noticed as I've gotten older. Could be due to testosterone going down, your interest in women going down, but more importantly, I think guys like sports and physicality. When we were younger, we so intensely burnt that fuel of chasing after women and trying so hard. Is you notice their laziness, and at least I do, as I get older, because I don't have the energy or interest to chase anymore. I don't have the energy or sexual interest as I once did. And so now it's just reciprocal human beings being kind to each other and being fair to each other, regardless of sex. Because, like, say in my case, reproduction, biology, that's kind of dissipated. Like, it's not a reality. So all that's left is you treating me well as a human being and vice versa. And so with that, I really start to see a female's laziness, where she is still operating on her former young self, where she was in her reproductive prime, where she didn't have to try at all. She'd just show up and we do all of the work, trying to win her and getting her to choose us, like an employee trying to get a job in a big company and, showing our resume, turning up, being punctual, doing everything that was on her checklist that is required of us to be the boyfriend, to be the partner. But now it's kind of, no, I'm not trying any more than you are. And if anything, as you get older, you don't care about relationships the way you did before. Because here's the thing, when we were younger, women forever extended their options because they were in their reproductive and youthful, sexy prime. And so they didn't care too much about relationships, not as seriously as us, because they wanted to keep their options open. They didn't want to choose the wrong guy. But when they're older, it's kind of like I've become virtually invisible. You could say the same thing about us guys, but we don't really care. It's like saying to me, well, you can't ride a skateboard anymore. I don't give a shit. It's the shaming doesn't work. Like, try something else. But I think getting back to it, the laziness becomes more apparent with women now because you just care so much less. As always, I'm curious, blah, blah, blah. Thanks, Greg. Well, I appreciate your donation and thoughtful question, Greg. And it's something I think is a good addition to my previous video. What if I didn't break up with that almost perfect woman in the past? But everything was great. And the fact that there was something so big that would cause me to break up, a deal breaker, a real rational deal breaker, I think you can't ignore. You can't say, well, maybe if I went back in time, I would have tolerated this and we'd still be together. Why? So you're not alone? You would have had an awful life if you tolerated a pillar that was antithetical to your ethics and morals and virtues. In my case, I had a great relationship in my 30s, and I was always open and honest about not wanting children and a family. But as the years progressed, her path changed and she just really felt the pull to have children. And she was younger than me. And I could understand, I cared for her. But I'm not going to hold anyone to me where she's going to resent me for the rest of my life. And that's a central pillar. That's for her to tolerate and sever and ignore the desire for children and to have children would be like me to ignore not having children, not having my freedom, not having my autonomy. The two people have to share the same values. The two people need to be on the same page ethically, morally, virtue-wise, and value-wise. And those are central things. I'm not talking about, Seinfeld dismissals, like she's left-handed, fuck her, onto the next one. It's kind of looking for perfection to sort of mask your fear of intimacy or this neurotic fear of losing any ground in your life. You need to cooperate. in relationships, sure, and there's give and take to a degree, but you've got to have boundaries, how much you'll give and how much you'll let someone take. You can argue you want someone that's completely submissive, but then you've got a hollow shell. What does that say about you? You're fine with someone who you can't have a conversation with that just says yes to everything you say. I don't know about you, but I've had gorgeous women who had nothing to say. So I guess you just need to be honest with yourself, and thinking what if about your past decisions, to me, is pointless. All you can do is be honest with what you know you believe in now. Be honest with your values now. You can try this and try that, and yeah, she seems nice, we'll see how it goes. But the moment you butt up against a central pillar of your values that you need to give up, that you will resent, they're asking you to give up this part of yourself, I think all you can do is be honest with them now, because continually being fearful of the future and like, I'm going to protect myself from all women, which, okay, fine, but just be honest whether you're just saying like, I want to avoid all risk, fine, but then you've got the consequences of that too. And also there's living in the past and saying, maybe I should have this, maybe I should have that. Well, maybe you can just do it now, moving forward, because that's all you can do. So it's a good question in the sense of why it's pointless focusing that attention in the past. It's better knowing all this now and making those decisions, and then being mindful of the decisions you're making, particularly with women. And if you do want kids, make good moral and ethical choices with them. Don't ignore the important things just because she's hot, if you really say want children in the coming years ahead. So anyway, thanks Greg for the donation and the question. Talk to you all later. If you appreciate my videos, I appreciate your donations and non-autistic comments. Links below. Thanks, guys.